Hi there, I'm Lance and I'm a gamer.
And I'm Sam, and I'm a non-gamer.
And we are Love to Hate, where we help gamers find great games to play with non-gamers.
And today we're taking a look at Intent to Kill by Hobby World, distributed in North America by 25th Century Games.
All right, so this is Intent to Kill, and this was a part of 25th Century Games' latest Kickstarter campaign, which just wrapped up not too long ago. I do believe you can still late pledge on that if you're watching this video soon after we've released it, but we're going to go ahead and do a review on this video because this is a final product, or close to a final product. This is a game that Hobby World has brought over on the other side of the world in Russia and in those parts. But this is an English copy, and 25th Century Games has the rights to distribute it in North America, and that's what the Kickstarter campaign was for. And so we are going to give our final thoughts, our review on this game. A little bit unusual for us, being since this was just on a Kickstarter not too long ago, but we've got the final product, so to speak. I know there's some deluxe components and whatnot, but anyhow, this is a game in which you are going to be playing either as a detective trying to track down a serial killer, or you're going to be playing as that serial killer trying to murder 5 people throughout the course of the game and trying to evade the detective in this one. So this is a little bit of a cat and mouse kind of game. Let's go down to the table where I'll show you how this one works, and then we'll come back and share our thoughts on it as a gamer and non-gamer. All right, I have Intent to Kill out on the table. Let me show you all this game about one player or team being a serial killer, while the other player or team is a detective trying to catch that serial killer. That's right, in this game, you are going to be going head-to-head against another player, or if you've got more than 2 players, you are going to be playing in 2 teams. Now, what you have for components, you have a fairly large board, and this board is going to represent a city that is divided up into a 4x4 grid of these squares. And so I'm going to pan the camera up a little bit so you can see that top row, but just know that it's up there because I'm not going to show it again for the rest of this portion of the video. We're going to primarily focus on this bottom portion of the board. You do have lots of character cards. In addition to the ones that are seen out here on the board, you've got several more that are not going to be in every game that you play because you're only going to play with 20 of these. And so you've got lots of characters to be able to play with. You do have lots of cards in the game. You do have some standees of the buildings, and you have some tokens, some tiles. Now, that's what you got for components. I guess you do also have a notepad that you can keep notes with and a pencil that you can write with as well. Now, how this game is going to work. As part of setup, the player or team that is playing as the serial killer, they're going to make some choices as part of setup that's going to determine who they are in the game, because one of these characters that are out here, they are secretly a serial killer. Could it be the judge? Could it be the mafia don? Probably. Could it be the psychiatrist? Well, yeah, he's in mental health, so he's a little bit crazy. I can say that because I'm in mental health. But anyhow, one of these people out here, they're going to be a serial killer. In addition to that, one other player is going to be the person of interest, which you can kind of think of them as being the accomplice. And then in addition to those 2 things, one of the color groups out here, as you can see, each character is a part of a group and an icon which represents their social class, if you will. They are going to be represented by these tokens right here, and one of them is going to be a secret supporter group of the serial killer. So they're a little bit sympathetic towards the serial killer, and they're going to help them get by. They're going to help them get out from the grip of the law. And this is going to be kept hidden from the detective team. In addition to those things that I've already mentioned, the serial killer will also have a motive. Now, in the base game, there are going to be 6 different types of motives. You've got a terrorist, a vigilante, cutthroat, killer, maniac, and sadist. And each one's going to come with their own unique outline by which the murderer is only allowed to murder. So as you can see here, the sadist, you cannot murder intimidated civilians. We'll talk about what does intimidated mean. But basically, you have to play by this rule if you are the serial killer. Now, the serial killer is going to have their own deck to pick from, and then the detective team is going to have their own deck of matching cards that they're going to use to try to narrow down what is the possible motive for the serial killer in the game. Now, having made all of those choices, they're going to keep their choices hidden from the detective team because that's what they're trying to figure out throughout the course of the game. How a round is going to work. Every round, and there are 5 rounds in this game, is going to start with the serial killer murdering somebody out on the board. So let's say that it happens to be the professor here. Unfortunately, Mr. Professor, you are murdered. And they're going to replace the professor card with the body card for round 1, and they're going to place it like this, because if there happen to be any other civilians in that area, well, then they would get moved out by the detective player to an adjacent square, because you can't have civilians, contaminating the crime scene. Now, I do want to point out on these character cards, there are not only is there great artwork, but there's going to be a name, and there's going to be specific details down here, such as being a male and being in his 60s, of medium built and of medium height. And each character is going to have their own stats, and that's very important because the detective is going to use this information to figure out who could be the killer. Now, this person would go over here on this side of the board, taking up the top spot at the very top, which you can't really see. And then the detective would show up to that scene of the crime. But first, before that happens, I almost forgot, the killer would get to pick 2 different characters anywhere out on the board that the detective is not already in their spot. So if the detective's right here, you couldn't do this to the fence right here. You'd have to pick someone else. But basically, they get to flip their card over to the black and white side. This means they're intimidated. And it means that the detective will not be able to ask them questions for that round. And so you want to pick out, strategically pick who you think the detective would probably ask questions of for that round and flip those people over if you're playing as the serial killer. Then the next thing that's going to happen is the detective is going to show up at the scene of the crime. And at this point, the detective has got 2 actions and 2 free points of movement from wherever the scene of the crime is for that round to be able to figure some things out about who the serial killer could be. So let's cover what different actions the detective could take. The first action is that they could question someone that's in that space that they're at that is not intimidated, meaning they're on their color side. And so what does a question mean? Well, it means that they are going to ask the serial killer team a question from the vantage point of the person that is answering the question. And the question could be simply something like, is the killer a male? Or is the killer short? Are they in their 40s? Something along those lines. Has to be a yes or no question. Now, the player or team that is playing as the serial killer, they have to answer truthfully. They have to answer that question truthfully unless one of 3 possibilities are happening with that specific question. The first would be, is this person actually the serial killer themselves? Or are they the accomplice? That would be the second scenario. And then the third scenario would be, do they belong to the secret supporter group that the serial killer has selected for themselves? If it's one of those 3 possibilities, then the serial killer or serial killer team does not have to answer honestly if they don't want to. They could lie. They could tell the truth. It's kind of up to them. But if it's not one of those 3 things, they absolutely have to tell the truth. So that's one possible action. Another action could be that they could take the building action if there is a building at the spot that they're currently at. So let's cover what are the different buildings. Well, since we're already right here at the police station, let's talk about the police station action. The police station action is going to allow the detective team to gain the surveillance token, and they can place that token on any player that's on the board. So say maybe I go over here to the ball player, and I can spend this surveillance token at any time in the game. I don't have to do it the moment that I place it on a character. But when I decide to use it, I'm going to ask the serial killer, could you murder this person right now? And the serial killer would have to answer honestly, no matter what. And that could give me some information as to what the motive might be, because a lot of these motives have to do with where that person is at on the board when they're murdered, or where the detective is at, or something along those lines. And so I could narrow in on the motive with that, but also it could give me some info as to, is this the actual serial killer? Because let's say that the ball player is the serial killer. Well, the serial killer could not kill themselves. You can't commit suicide in this game. And so that could give me a little bit of info. Maybe it's the ball player if the serial killer says, nope, can't kill the ball player. So that's how the surveillance token and the police station work. Let's talk about the hospital. So the hospital is going to allow you to comfort somebody who is flipped over on their intimidated side, flipping them back over to this side so that you could then question them on a future turn. The diner is going to allow you to question someone that is adjacent to a diner. So let's say I happen to come here with the Mafia Don and he's not intimidated, he's on this side. I could spend my first action questioning the Mafia Don, but I could not spend a point of movement to come over here and question the psychiatrist, because your two actions have to be different actions. But I could question the Mafia Don for my first one and then use the diner as my second action, which allows me to question the psychiatrist. So the diner allows you to basically kind of do two questionings if you wanted to. Now the fire station right here, the fire station is going to allow you to draw the top tile off of the social group stack and be able to reveal it, letting yourself know that this can't possibly be the social group for the serial killer, because their tile is set off over here on the other side of the board. Now I didn't mention this, but as part of setup, they're actually going to get 3 tiles dealt to them, and they're only going to keep 1, and they're going to place the other 2 unseen back to the box. So there are going to be 3 missing from this stack. So even if you saw all 6 of the ones that are over here, there's no way to be able to narrow it down any more than 33%. So that's how that works. Now, again, they're going to be taking 2 different actions on their turn with 2 free points of movement. At the end of that, if there happens to be any characters that are in the space where they end their turn, then they will get to comfort those for free, flipping them back over to their colored side. And then the murderer is going to reveal the top tile from the supporter stack. Everybody would get to see that. And then they would get to move each person that is in this group 1 space. Now, why might they do that? They might do it because it allows them to move somebody into a spot where maybe they could kill them, whereas they weren't there in that spot before. Then the detective group will actually get to do the same thing, revealing another tile and moving anybody that is in that category. Then these 2 tiles are going to be shuffled back into the stack, and you would start the next round. Now, this is going to continue for 5 full rounds, at which point, at the end of the 5th round, the detective will get 1 guess and 1 guess only as to who is still alive out here on the board that could possibly be the serial killer. The serial killer team will reveal their identity, and if the detective is correct, then they win, and if they're incorrect, then they lose. Now, that's how you play the basic game. I do want to point out that there is an advanced game that involves more cards, and basically how these work, the serial killer team has got 2 cards underneath each body card as part of setup, and every time they murder somebody, they get to keep one of these 2 cards, which are basically going to give them special different actions that they could do throughout the course of the game. They are going to make the detective's life a little bit more difficult, and there are opportunities for them to earn more cards depending upon what the detective does. The detective has extra cards themselves, but they also have these tokens that are over here on the other side that are going to match the same icons as on the buildings. Now, these are going to be face down. All of them will be face down. There's a lot of these. I've only got a handful here. But basically, as part of their turn for their 2 actions, one of their actions could be to be at the crime scene and investigate the crime scene, allowing them to draw one of these tokens. And if they happen to ever be in the same spot as a building with one of the matching icons of one of the tokens that they have, they can spin that token, being able to draw one of the 3 cards that are from this deck that are in the market. And then they could spin that for the action that happens to be on the card. Now, they are going to have opportunities to earn more tokens based off of the cards that the serial killer team plays. So there's lots of opportunities for you to get lots of cards, and basically the cards are going to give you bonuses and one-offs and that sort of thing. But that's basically the advanced mode. It does come with another set of motives for you to play with that are going to be a little bit more challenging for the detective to kind of narrow in on. You've got the cultist, the spy, the cannibal, the robber, the radical, and the psychopath. So basically, you got a whole nother set of things to try to figure out why the serial killer is doing what they're doing. But basically, that's what you have here with Intent to Kill. I will point one last thing out, and that is that the rulebook isn't shy about mentioning that it is more challenging to play as the detective, whereas it's a little bit easier to be playing as the serial killer in this game. With all that being said, let's go back up top and share our thoughts on Intent to Kill. And we're back, and now we're going to share our thoughts on Intent to Kill from a gamer and non-gamer's perspective. So, Sam, first thing I think about when I think of this game is just the theme. Obviously, this is a very themey game, and it is 1960s United States, serial killer, detective, you know, and it bills itself as being a 2 to 4 player game, but it's really 2 teams if you're going to play with more than 2 players. I feel like it's probably best at a 2-player game. I mean, you could get away with playing 3 or 4 players, I suppose, but it's really, you know, one team against the other team. What'd you think? What were your initial thoughts and feelings about Intent to Kill?
I mean, I think anytime I see any type of, murder type game, you kind of can't help but go to Clue.
Sure.
And compare it a little bit to what's it going to be like.
The original deduction.
Yeah, because you're obviously it's the same idea. You're trying to find the murderer.
Yeah.
And all that.
Motive.
Their motive. And so you kind of go towards that, which obviously Clue is a children's game. It's easy to play. So that's kind of my base for this game. But it definitely is a very interesting layout. All the people, lots of choices to make. And the movement wise is actually a little bit easier than Clue.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But I would say the deduction aspect of it was quite more difficult.
Yes, and I think you definitely have different experiences depending upon which side of this you play as. If you play as the serial killer, and the rulebook even confirms this, it is an easier experience. And so if you're playing as the detective, that is much more having to deduce and try to figure out, whereas as the killer, it's all about, well, how can I make them have to have more options to have to wade through, right? Like you're wanting to kill smartly in this game and not eliminate the other characters that are very similar to who you are, right? Like if I'm a 60-year-old tall woman, I don't want to kill the only other 60-year-old tall woman on the board, right? Like,
and there is a lot, like the first time you play it, you're not really paying attention to all those stuff. You're trying to learning. This is definitely a game that you will do better on the more you play it. And we've switched roles. Lance definitely likes being the detective more, and I like to be the murderer more, which definitely goes with gamer and non-gamer, I think.
Which I think is one thing that makes this an excellent game for gamer, non-gamer couples or whoever you might be playing with, because you've got those 2 roles. And you can even say, hey, you know, the killer role in this game is more suited for a non-gamer novice kind of player, whereas the detective is absolutely a little more intensive, a little bit more scrutiny. Like you have to kind of figure out some things a little bit more. Now you play that advanced mode where you've got the action cards, and I feel like that even makes it even more so that you as the detective, you need to be on top of your game, because trying to figure out who the killer is one thing, but then when they're able to play these action cards against you, it just makes it even more difficult. But anyway, I think it's perfect for that kind of setup, gamer, non-gamer. Talk about what it was like for you trying to figure your way out in this game and trying to do well.
Like I said, I think the first time it's a lot of just kind of like a little bit, you're going in a little bit.
Make mistakes.
Yes. I did. The second time I played, I was the detective, but I was paying more attention to smaller details. The first time I didn't even think, like Lance said, to not kill the person that's closest to your, like that didn't make any sense to me. But as you play and you figure out how they're deducting who's the killer, it makes you a better detective the next time.
Yeah, you definitely learn from your mistakes as you play this game. And I think when you play that advanced mode and you get those action cards to be able to do different things, that even makes it more so the case that you need to be, learning from your mistakes, even in the mid game, like as you're playing the game. And I like that this is a game in which you're playing 5 rounds and each round sort of builds on itself because you're eliminating people on the board because you're killing them, right? Or the detective is able to eliminate different motives based upon where the killing is happening or where the detective's at whenever it happens, and that sort of thing. Like, you're figuring things out and you're kind of zoning in. For me, it absolutely gives that feel of cat and mouse, right? Like the detective just has to get lucky one time, whereas the killer has to get lucky every time, right? Like, it definitely gives you that feeling, and I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to pros and cons here for Intent to Kill. Sam, bullet point highlights for you as a non-gamer. What sticks out in a positive way about this game?
I mean, it's definitely unique. I mean, it has that deduction, murder theme, but it is unique, I think, with how you're playing the murderer and how you're playing the detective. So it's very cool looking.
Yeah, I like the presentation, the way it is on the board.
Yeah, and it is pretty quick. I feel like some games like this can take a long time, but it limits itself. You kill 5 people and then you either have an answer or you don't.
Right.
So I like that about it too.
Yeah, and I like that it's all about just at the end, right? Like, it is you're not going through this having to ask these questions and get the cards and get the clues.
You're just paying attention.
Yes. Yeah. And you get one chance, one chance. And if you better have it figured out, and if you don't.
People may not like that.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose it's
so. I guess it's kind of what you're looking for, but I think we both appreciated that.
I like the excitement of it. Like, I think I know, but I'm not 100% sure, right? Like, that, I don't know. That's a fun thing for me. You mentioned the way it looks, and I love the theming of it, right? Because it sort of looks like 1960s with the mapping on the background and the different artwork. The artwork is fantastic in this game. I feel like every character is unique, and you can kind of see them in their role as whatever their title is. So I love the way it looks out on the board. Anything about it that maybe doesn't work so great for you?
I don't know. I feel like some of the motives are very clear just by who you're killing, and some are a little bit more vague. So I feel like, I don't know, it's almost like there's easier ones for sure.
Well, they're actually, so again, check out the rules portion of the video. There's 2 different sets of motives, and there are some that are definitely easier that you want to try out your first time of playing, and then there are definitely some that are more advanced. But to what Sam is saying, I felt like that there were some that are just like, you're going to know after the first turn that it can't be
by the set. Okay.
Yeah, that it can't be, a handful of them. So they're really narrowing. The detective is able to really narrow down a good number of motives pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I guess, the design behind it, if there was something that, had to be done to really help the detective eliminate or figure out one part of the puzzle quickly, the motive might be the easiest one.
But I had such a hard time as a detective. I got the motive pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I got that correct. But finding the murderer and the accomplice, I had a really hard time with that. Lance did a lot better at that, and that's just maybe how our minds work. But I guess I agree. Like, there needs to be something that's a little simpler to get so you can focus more on the other aspect.
To that, the only con that I think I would have about this game is kind of similar to what Sam just said there, and that's the lying aspect in this game. That because it is only 5 rounds long, and if the detective is unlucky and questions the murderer themselves or the supporter group of the murderer, or I guess the accomplice or the person of interest is what it's called. If they're unlucky and they question that person and you feed them a lie, it's going to really, not upset them, but it's going to, disrupt them in being able to figure out, well, what's true and what's not true. And that can set you back. And there's only 5 rounds. So like, you're taking out 20% of their game by doing that at least.
Yeah.
And so,
I feel like maybe only the murderer should be able to lie.
Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe I don't know.
When you have 2 people that can lie and you only have 5 rounds,
Yeah,
I'm getting close to 50% of.
yeah, and it's not that nobody should be able to lie, because the killer does need to have a way of being able to get out, right? Otherwise, it's just going to be too straightforward. But that's too many options, I feel like. You've got the killer, the person of interest, and then a supporter group, which is if the killer gets the option, they're always going to pick the one that's the biggest group on the board, more than likely. I guess you as the detective could figure that they would do that, so maybe don't ask those people, but I don't know. To me, that just opens the door for too many chances for the killer to get away. That's the only negative I have about it. Any others for you?
No, that's probably my main one as well.
Okay, let's get to our scores here for Intent to Kill. Scale of 1 to 10, love to hate. What did you think about Intent to Kill?
I liked it. I think it's a good game that me and you can play pretty quickly. And has, a little, it's not so much a board game as much of that deduction game.
Yes.
I'd probably give it a 7.3.
Okay, all right. I really like this one. This is going to be one that I want to keep coming back to over and over again. And I feel like the action cards add enough of an extra punch to the game that I don't know that I would ever want to play without them. So once you can graduate beyond that entry level version of the game and can really get to those action cards, I would recommend doing so for sure. And that one negative that I mentioned, it could just simply be a house rule if you want to play it that way. I don't know. But anyway, I don't think that's enough for me to not want to play this game at all. I give this one an 8, a solid 8 on this one. I really like it. Potentially something that might be in my top 10 for 2025. I'm not sure. I mean, it's really early, but definitely one that I really enjoy.
Did her top 10 like
for 2024, yeah. But no, this is a really good game, maybe even great game. So. The game is Intent to Kill. Again, it is from Hobby World, but is being brought to North America by 25th Century Games. Leave us some comments down below. Let us know what you think about Intent to Kill.
Make sure to like and subscribe and push that bell button so you get notifications of all our new content.
I'm Lance.
I'm Sam.
And we are Love to Hate, where we bridge the gap between gamers and non-gamers. We'll catch you next time.